Generally speaking, when we bring up brand awareness, I think people are pretty responsive to it because we can really explain, like we were just talking about, why does this matter? And even if you have a lot of brand awareness, you still need more. Just because people are aware of you, are they aware of you and thinking about you? We want to live in people's brains rent free. And so we want them to have a really positive perception of us as a brand so that when they are considering us, they think of us.
Welcome back to the Honest Marketing Podcast, where you learn proven strategies to grow your business without selling your soul. I'm your host, Travis Albritton, and today with me is Owen Garitty. He is the founder of FPW Media, and we're going to be talking about branding, brand story, brand execution, and then also AI, because that seems to be a thing people are interested in nowadays, and then also kind of peeling back some of the layers and the curtains and learning what they're doing in their agency to increase deal flow, find the right prospects, and have the right conversations at the right time. But Owen, super excited to have you on the show today.
Travis, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So why don't we just kind of kick off with a little origin story for anyone that's listening that hasn't come across you or your agency before. How did you start FPW Media? What was the story behind that? And then what's the journey been like since you started it?
Absolutely. So I had a very non-traditional journey to where I am today. Started doing professional photography when I was the old age of 15 years old and continued that throughout my teens. And then right out of high school, actually got hired by a couple of relatively, well-known brands at the time and just started shooting content for them. And I've always been one of those people that just raises their hands. I'm a yes, I'll do that and I'll figure it out later kind of person. And so I just took every opportunity that came my way. And eventually within, about a year being out of high school, I was, going to college in business school, but also commuting, 2 or 3 times a week to Portland from Eugene, where I was living at the time, and just started doing marketing for all these brands in addition to the photo and the video work. And, had an epiphany about, a year into doing that of why am I paying to sit in these classes when I'm doing more than some of the professors have ever done. And it just didn't really make sense to continue that. So I, took the leap, dropped out of school and started what is now FPW when I was in my early 20s.
And so talk about what those initial first steps were like, and obviously it's evolved and grown and you developed different aspects based on your own experience, but then also as the team you built out and also as your clients came with questions and capabilities and things like that. So walk me through kind of like the initial idea of, maybe I'll just create an agency as a service or me as a service, Owen Incorporated, or, did it start with a team? Like, what's kind of the evolution of the business been and how have you specifically through the lens of how did you identify the right opportunities to add in services instead of just like, oh yeah, we can do that too. And then that becomes a distraction or something that's pulling you away from your core focus?
Great question. So I think like many businesses, we were founded out of a perceived need that I saw in the market. So in this experience with working with these different brands, I got to brush up against a lot of different agencies. And by and large, it was a really terrible experience. A lot of ego, a lot of people sitting around in conference rooms, bringing a questionable amount of value, pontificating at length, on the client's dollar. And so I had this idea and I was already working through this concept that I don't think I want to be just a professional photographer. I think there's more opportunity here. And so I came up with this idea of what if you create an agency that's very story first, very client first, and do things just completely differently. And I didn't know any better, right? So it allowed me to not know how that you're supposed to do something, right? And just go based on what I saw clients needed. And so we came up with this unagency concept, which is from day one, we've tried to be the unagency, which is we have, different creative studios inside of our company, each run as mini agencies. And the reason for that is that clients can do business with one or all of those. So we can service their 360 needs and we have all of it in-house. It's all vertically integrated, or they can do, transact with just one. And the way that we got there was saying yes to literally everything. I mean, what we experienced and what I experienced, especially starting out, and it's so interesting to me that people, I think, really don't do this as much as they used to, is that I just said yes to every opportunity. It didn't matter whether it was a moneymaker or not. If it was something that I thought was going to build our reputation or our brand at the time, I just said yes. knew that I would either figure it out myself or hire somebody to do it early on. And then obviously as the team grew, started feeling more and more confident in the team's overall ability. But we just kept saying yes and kept driving. Each of our divisions launched because a client came to us and said, "Hey, can you do XYZ thing?" And we said, "Absolutely, we'll get that done."
And I'm curious on, launching these different initiatives and saying yes to opportunities, how you really think about, because you're right, agencies get a really bad rep. It's most typically well-deserved of here's our box, fit in our box, and we'll get you some indiscernible results. And we didn't get the results, but it's your fault. It's not our fault. And, but we're happy to keep collecting the retainer. How has that approach to partnership with brands differentiated you in the marketplace? Have you found that, brands or companies that you're working with had come off of like unceremonious divorces from previous agency partners, and you're able to kind of come in and be the antithesis to that? Or even just from the perspective, I imagine that as you develop these close-knit relationships with your clients, that they stick with you longer, you're able to have more of a long-term strategy play in mind instead of let's continue to reinforce our value month over month, otherwise they'll leave us. Like, how has that impacted your client relationships and just the nature of the work you get to do because of that different perspective?
So my ethos from almost day one has been that there's so many really talented creatives and there's really a lot of talented agencies. And at the end of the day, any large client has a plethora of choice, right? They can choose and are approached almost on a daily basis by every agency under the sun. And so to stand out and to have those long-term relationships, what I have focused on with my team is that the customer experience part. So what is the experience that a client has in transacting with us on a daily basis? What level of partnership are we providing with them? And so what we want it to be is as if it's a luxury hospitality experience, right? When you check into a really nice 5-star resort somewhere, from the second you talk to the front desk all the way up to your room, to then when you're in the room, there's this beautiful thing called the hotel phone, and you can call it, and any desire under the sun can materialize within a short order, whether that be an experience, food, whatever, right? So taking that concept and applying it to the agency world of, I want our clients to be able to call their single point of contact on my team and get anything they need for their marketing, period. And know that we have done our due diligence to understand their industry, to understand their customers, to work with them on what an ICP should look like, to get to a point where we can just execute that flawlessly, regardless of what it is, what channel, how big the campaign is, so forth and so on. And so by doing that, our average client engagement is multiple years. I mean, it's not a short period of time. And I think that's all due to the fact of putting that client experience absolutely front and center. We have a tagline on our walls, which is, we make the impossible possible on a daily basis. And so that's what we sell. Like we're creating things, we're pulling the rabbit out of the hat every day.
Are there any pragmatic or practical examples that you can share of like things that you do to create that experience, whether it's, internal KPIs for turnaround response time when a client asks you a question, if it's like, hey, we use Slack and have all these automations built in, or like, how do you maintain that 5-star experience at a practical system level within your team?
All of the above. So, I mean, it starts with the mentality. FPW stands for fast-paced world. So we put it in the name for a reason. It's not anybody's initials. People always think that it is, but that is explained to somebody who starts on our team day one, what that means. Then we go to our mission, vision, and values, which we have up everywhere, which is, again, reinforcing that same concept of being client first, creating beautiful things in a fast-paced world. That's another, verbiage tree that we use. So really getting people on board with this service level as a concept. And then we, of course, have a whole number of service suites. So project management obviously is, I think, key for us. So we use Trello from a project management perspective. We have we've actually coded a couple of custom like client intake programs that help us feed the information in and get it organized. We have a really robust support staff. So we have a fantastic, office management team that oversees all of our more clerical type stuff so that the creatives and the account managers can really focus on being with the clients and working through their challenges, and that we have everything really well organized, streamlined, all of that. We love Slack, of course. We have Slack channels with a lot of our clients too, which is really nice. If they're happy to be on Slack, we share that. We also share project management spaces with a lot of our clients, right? Whether that be our project management system or we create a mirroring system to whatever their project management system they use. We're just really big on transparency. If everybody has the same level of information, we're going to be able to achieve things much more efficiently, quickly, of a lot higher quality, all of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, something that you mentioned before when you were talking about your ethos and your approach and really having a we can do anything for you type agency, I imagine one of the beginning starting block phases is figuring out what are we trying to say about your business, about your brand, and who are we trying to say it to. So I'd love to hear, your approach to crafting a brand story that's effective, not just from we can paint this in letters on the wall and everybody feels good about it, but in a really effective, like in the real world, boots on the ground, let's execute some high level strategy. What does that approach look like for your team when you're working with a new client, bring them in and really establishing that marketing, messaging, brand story? What are the key pieces that you always make sure you establish right out the gate?
Number one is, do we understand who we're trying to talk to? So do we have a sense of who our ideal customer or our current customer or the customer we desire is? Because if we don't understand that, we're going to create messaging, we're going to create experiences that fall flat, or even worst case scenario, offend or disengage somebody who's otherwise loyal to the brand. So that's where we always begin. And depending on the clients we work with, sometimes, some of our clients, they've been in business close to 100 years. So they understand that part. And what really they're looking at is how do we modernize our message, or how do we shift it for this new emerging market, so forth and so on. Now, when we're working with blank slate, say it's a fast growing startup or something like that, we get to be a little bit less rigid, so we can play a little bit more, so to speak, more room to run. And so we would work through a series of exercises that would get us to that ideal customer profile, or ICP. And then from there, it's creating a story arc. Just like if you were developing, in our view, we use a lot of films terms because that's where we started. But developing a story arc of what is a customer journey going to look like, and what messaging are we going to serve them at every point of that journey. And that's how we approach everything we do from engaging with a client's customer standpoint. And we find it really effective because at the end of the day, I think the last statistic I saw was that the average person in the United States sees about 5,000 ads a day, roughly. And so to be the one in the 5,000 that's going to stand out and engage, you have to have some sort of value that you're providing to that person. And so starting with understanding who they are, what matters to them, and then taking it a step further of how do we create a series of touch points that are at the right time, that have the right message, and that are going to get somebody to emotionally react, right? I think oftentimes, people in marketing think it's just, manipulating people. It is to a degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in a negative way, right? Of can we get them to feel something that is going to, on a deep level, provide value to them, and thereby get them to do whatever trigger we want for that campaign, whether that be to sign up for something, to buy something, to learn more, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and I know typically most marketing campaigns, if they're sales driven, where it's like we want to put $1 in and get $2, $3, $4, $5 out, the climax of the campaign is where you consummate the business relationship. They become a client, they become a customer, but it's well established. Not everyone wants to buy your widget right now, or is even in the
Correct.
market for it, or even aware that they have the problem that your solution solves. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that sequencing of communication looks like, the amount of research and kind of internal ICP avatar creation that you do to identify the needs or the different levels of awareness that a prospect may have depending on where they fit in. But then I'd also love to hear how you sequence that messaging so it's delivered in the right order. Because I know a lot of businesses, they think, okay, we need to have like general brand awareness. So we'll run those. At the same time, we'll run direct call to action campaigns. At the same time, we'll promote this new blog post we have. And it's like all the messages all at the same time. and you're just kind of like throwing spaghetti on the wall, hoping one of them resonates with somebody. And so I'd also love to hear about how you structure the campaigns to really maximize the effectiveness of that story that you're sharing with the prospect.
Yeah. So I like the sort of the jab, jab, left hook, right? Obviously, I didn't come up with that. Some very smart people did. But this idea that, everything is working in concert with everything else. One of the ways that we kind of dive into this is we look at the data, right? So let's say, for instance, client X is trying to get people to convert on their website. And we see that a lot of people are coming to the homepage, but they're not going any further. That might tell us one thing. And so then we're going to structure the story based on how do we get them deeper into the pages, or do we create content that's actually going to take them to a deeper part in the site to start, for instance. I think you said something really interesting, which is, sales-based campaigns, it's just a call to action. Well, a lot of clients really only just want to pay for that. They don't want to pay for the high level. And it's a lot harder as marketers to justify the spend for the brand awareness. So we do a lot of data analysis and education and talking through with the client side of, hey, we think you have an overall brand awareness problem, and we can do direct CTA based campaigns all day long. But if we layer in brand awareness, you're going to see a lift of 10% or whatever it may be, because people will already be primed to your product or service. But all that, I think, is really usually for us driven by what is the expected sales cycle. So, we have clients whose product sales cycle are a year, for instance, and then we have clients whose product sales cycle is that day and everything in between. And so we always look at what is our expected time somebody's going to spend in a funnel. And then we're going to make sure that we are talking to them on an acceptable frequency so that we're staying top of mind. Because for us, it's really less about we want to convert somebody at any given time. We just want to be top of mind when they're ready to convert. And at least in our view, it's almost impossible. It's like timing the stock market. It's almost impossible to know exactly when somebody's ready to convert. I know there's a lot of agencies that say they have proprietary tech that, says, oh, this person is ready to convert right now. But what we know is that human behavior is predictably unpredictable. Yeah. And even if somebody is two people can show all the same signals, but one's ready to buy right that day, and one needs to talk to their partner about it before they make the purchase. And they're going to show all the same things, for instance. And so it's really just for us about understanding holistically everything that goes into that product cycle decision making. What has the client seen from a data perspective in the past? And then also looking at competitors. If a competitor is outperforming us, what are they doing? Let's look at that. Why are they outperforming us? Is it that they have higher brand awareness, or are they better at reaching those people at the right time in the right place?
I'm curious, are you still seeing, because at least from my vantage point, marketing goes in cycles, and brand awareness since the beginning of marketing has always been the primary marketing mechanism. Because there was not this direct attribution model that we then got spoiled on with Google ads and then Facebook ads. So then it became this gold rush to like figure out, how do I get my CPC campaign running? How do I get my Facebook ads running? And then it's nice because you get a table that says you spent 50 cents and you made $1.20. So do you want to load more money into the slot machine? Yes, of course. And then of course they were like, well, now that we have all this revenue coming in, let's build it for our purposes instead of the business purposes. And so then now your costs are going all over the place. Google's not nearly as a slam dunk as it used to be, where you could just throw money into it and it just printed money for you. And so at least from my vantage point, I've seen a lot more companies wake up to the idea or the fact that they can't just rely on performance marketing 100% for any kind of long-term sustained engagement. Because the great thing about performance marketing is if you want more marketing, you just turn it up. The problem with that is that if you ever turn it off, there goes all of your marketing efforts. And so seeing a lot more brands and companies say, we need some ongoing awareness style campaigns to supplement the performance campaigns we're running. Are you seeing that just in the zeitgeist of the brands and companies you're working with? Or is that something you're still seeing that you have to educate them on? Or does it vary depending on who the founder or the person is that you're talking to?
Yeah, it varies depending on the industry, I think, more than anything else. Certain sectors, I think, are a little bit sort of have different views on that. What I would say though is that people are getting really smart, which I'm glad to see, about the cliff that happens, right? That you can't just infinitely spend on performance marketing and maintain the same ROAS or the same efficacy. It just doesn't work that way. And that's something that, a few years ago, I think we had to really coach people on, because it was just like, well, let's just spend more. And it's like, okay, but eventually that's not going to work. And so I think that people are getting really smart to the fact that they need to have layered campaigns, even if it's all performance marketing. And generally speaking, when we bring up brand awareness, I think people are pretty responsive to it because we can really explain, like we were just talking about, why does this matter? And even if you have a lot of brand awareness, you still need more, right? If you think about it, I mean, Coca-Cola is the most recognized brand on the planet. It's like 6 billion people, I think, can recognize the logo or something like that, but they still do brand awareness marketing, right? So just because people are aware of you, are they aware of you and thinking about you, right? We talk a lot about, we want to live in people's brains rent free. And so we want them to have a really positive perception of us as a brand, so that when they are considering us, they think of us.
And something I'd love to hear more about is establishing, key measurables that you're looking at to determine the efficacy or the effectiveness of a campaign, especially when you're layering in multiple different executions or campaign styles or things like that. Because, going back to direct performance, and like one of the great things is you can track your cost per click, you can track your CPM on your impressions, you can track all the way to a thank you page and get the conversion costs. And like, you have these finite numbers to then give you an idea of how well or poorly is this campaign running. But what are the other indicators that you look to help not just communicate with the client and let them know how everything is going, but also for you internally to know what things need to be tweaked, what things are kind of like firing or operating as expected? Where do you find opportunities for improvement within those metrics? And, I just love to kind of hear how you think about the holistic dashboard of measuring a multi-layered campaign.
So we always try to tie as many performance metrics to financial as possible, right? And that the as possible is the key term there. But, you gave an example of, if you click on this ad and you buy this thing, we can directly tie ROI. Well, if you zoom out a few levels, you can still, generally speaking, directly tie ROI, right? We can look at what are the last 3 years of sales that this product had across this region, and all other things being created equal, what is a sales lift that we would expect to see by this fully integrated campaign? And we're looking at it at that really high level of like, is that perfect? Are there other factors that can influence it? Yeah, no, it's not perfect. And yes, there are other factors that can influence it, but at least it gets us in the ballpark. And it's a way to say, if we're not seeing this, then we really need to dive into all the data, right? And so it really is a guiding mechanism, both for the client and for the agency, so that both sides feel like, okay, when we report out on all the data, when we show you all of the visits that the web property is getting, or all of the conversions that the trade show experience generated, you can then also look at your books, and your accounting team can provide you a report that those two things feel like they're in the same reality. Because where we see problems arise is that the marketing side says everything's going perfectly. The business side says, no, it's not. And then there's sales, generally speaking, in the middle saying this, right? Going like, because that's, generally speaking, no offense to all the salespeople that are watching, that's generally speaking the first response, right? Now we try to align all three of those pieces and say, okay, let's talk about this together and try to pinpoint, where do we have this drop off, right? And so just looking at it a little bit more holistically has been really positive for us, and really positive for clients.
So it's more correlative, where you're looking at like large groupings of data, timing up the campaigns with the lift in the sales cycle, and whether it's number of calls that were booked, or whatever the key performance indicators are for each of these departments, and saying how are these things correlated together, all other things being equal, to shape the whole story, recognizing you don't have precise click data on everything that you want to measure. Is that a good way of saying it or understanding it?
That's a great way to say it. Yeah. And I think wherever possible too, we implement things like how did you hear about us questions,
Hmm.
right? How do we give taglines to the frontline sales team at the register, even, for instance? Or when people are calling in, how are we checking where they're coming from? Or if they're submitting a lead, can we add how you heard about us? And then we layer in a level of survey wherever possible, right? And clients have to have the budget for this. A lot of our clients don't. It just doesn't make sense, doesn't pencil. But for those that do, we want to do top of mind awareness studies so that we're gauging what is the general awareness. And then we also want to look at net promoter score. So are those scores moving up over time? Because that's another gauge of the general efficacy of what we're doing.
So I don't have a clean pivot into this. We're just going to hard left into
Let's do
AI,
it. Okay.
because
That's
certainly,
fitting, I think.
yeah, it feels like it's been an abrupt shift. And OpenAI recently announced that they're launching their own search engine. You think about the kinds of video creation that you can do, image creation. Obviously, ChatGPT has become much more ingrained, not just at a platform level, but in an API integration and all kinds of different platforms. I'm curious your perspective on how AI has shifted, not just like how agencies work or produce the deliverables, but even how businesses and agencies think about marketing when it comes to AI and the impact that AI has had on content creation. I have my own thoughts, but I'd be curious to hear yours.
Yeah, I think if I had that fully figured out, I'd be on an island instead of speaking to you on this podcast. No offense, right?
Hanging out with Larry
But
Ellison over in Hawaii,
that
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, I think to give you my take on that is that the consumer is a lot more intelligent than we as marketers and brands give them credit for most of the time. And really, what people want in this day and age is authenticity. And so, AI, in our view, is a tool, but it's not a wholesale answer, right? It's not going to completely replace a creative process. It's going to augment that process. But where you see brands get in trouble, and there's been countless examples of this, is that they're using AI creative with no human oversight or very little. And it's really damaging with the consumer because it just doesn't speak to them. It doesn't make sense, or it's just even slightly off putting, right? I think we've all looked at those AI images that, by all intents and purposes, they're perfect, but they're unsettling. You look at them and it's like, I don't connect with that in a way. And so, what I'm really interested in is hopefully somebody somewhere, one of the universities or somebody is doing some research on, hooking people up in a functional MRI and looking at, AI generated images versus human generated images. What is the brain pattern difference? Because I would guess that there is one to some degree, because what AI perceives to be perfect features and all these things are a very different lens than a human creator. Now that's not to say that we are anti-AI. I mean, we train AI models for our clients for them to use for high volume content creation and various other things. But we always talk about it of, again, this is a tool. This is not a wholesale change, right? When the car came along, it put a lot of horse and buggies out of business, but that doesn't mean that the way that goods move from one place to the other radically changed. They still went in a straight line on a street. And so to us is the same thing of like, we now have a much better horse, but that doesn't mean that everything else completely changes, right? We really like it for the data processing. We really like it for the research. We really like it for these, huge data sets, that kind of stuff. I think currently we're a little bit more hesitant on, should this just write all of our blogs, for instance? Probably not, because the search engines aren't being super forthright about how they're treating AI content. I think that there's a really dangerous thing where the search engines have to walk this very fine line. If they just highly rank AI generated content, in a very short order, you get to a point where none of it is actually real. And you are just infinitely referencing the same content and then you start to see the hallucination kick in. And the further you get away from the actual expertise of a human, you start to do some really interesting things. And so I think they have to protect their business model while also moving forward with technology. And that story is yet to be written of how is that actually going to play out. And so what we do at the agency and what we do with our clients is we are going to bring forth all the latest tools, make sure that those are fully integrated to the point that they make sense, but only for the underlying purpose of creating really meaningful stories, really meaningful imagery, really meaningful experiences for clients. And so it still has to check that box first and foremost. And if it doesn't, we're not going to recommend that we use the tool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There is certainly something deeply unsettling about seeing a hand model with 8 fingers. Just something about it just kind of throws me off whenever it
That
comes
doesn't do it
across
for
my
you,
feed.
huh?
No, it takes me out of reality. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there's an 8-fingered person out there somewhere, but not in my normal everyday, right? Yeah, from my vantage point, AI is an accelerator of tasks. And that seems to be its best application so far, is something that would take a lot of manual labor before, now it can be done very quickly, whether it's like summarizing meeting notes or, generating blog topics and concepts and ideas, doing some research and giving you feedback. But as far as like finished, polished outputs, I have a couple different issues with it. One is that the quality varies widely, even from the same model. Like you get ChatGPT to write you one blog post, and maybe it's like 99% perfect. And you're like, cool, well, I found my perfect prompt. I'll just put in a different keyword string, give me another blog post, boom, post that up. And it's like, it's absolute trash, right? Because there's no level of consistency within the models themselves. And so that's a problem I have with it, is it's not actually a reliable tool as an output generator. The other problem I have with it is just personally, I like to be really good at what I do and like exceptional compared to my peers, not in like an arrogance way, but just because, I'm driven that way. I want to be one of the best at what I do. And so if I'm using AI to create all my outputs, that's just the sum total of the average of everyone else's ideas and thoughts. And so it gives you a really great average answer. And so, for me, I've never really seen the value of, I just want all my outputs to be average or just like everybody else's, because that'll be a real differentiator in the marketplace. It's always seemed to me that, the agencies that have the expertise, the talent to actually put forward true thought leadership, those are going to be the profiles and the agencies and the businesses that stand out when everyone else is just turning to ChatGPT to write their blog posts. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's not Skynet yet. It's not quite something that's replacing creative work. Somewhere in the middle, I suppose.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's, when Photoshop came along, people had a huge uproar, right? Every time some sort of disruptive technology comes along, because of the way that creatives are attached to their work, unlike anybody else, right? I mean, if you talk to an accountant, I don't think they have the emotional connection to their work in the same way that somebody who's a graphic artist does, right? They very much have an identity in the work that they produce. And so I think that can be clouding on the flip side of it too, of that can, I think, then give everybody the impression that us as creatives are like, oh, AI is bad. It doesn't, whatever. It's not really a real thing. And we've had to really have conversations with clients around that, of saying, no. We believe in the power of AI. Actually, we are fully at the forefront of that. And we are pushing those tools and those models every day to their breaking point so that we can understand them and then make sure that we walk just a couple steps back to safety and then play there and live there with our clients, so that at all points we're maintaining that brand integrity and that brand safety. I think the last thing I would say on that is that whenever this comes out, it's probably already different than when it was today when we recorded.
For sure.
And that's the crazy thing, is that it's just going to continue to change. And so, my view on it is I'm excited by it. I think it's something that's really incredible. It forces the entire industry to upskill, I think, because if you're going to be better than that average, you better be better than that average. And so it's going to force everybody to get better, everybody to be more efficient. But also, I think if we use the tools properly, we can deliver more net value to clients, because we can do things at higher output, we can do things for less money, and ultimately we can provide more ROI, which is the point.
100%. Well, we've dug into a lot of really awesome topics. I'm really grateful for everything that you shared. Before we wrap, I would just love to kind of like peek behind the kimono a little bit, if you will. And I would just love to learn what kind of client acquisition or pipeline strategies that you're currently using at FPW for your own client acquisition. What are the mediums that you're looking at? What are the strategies you implement, campaigns that are working well for you for now, for your own deal flow, for your own pipeline and getting more clients?
Yeah, this is the question that I somewhat dread when I do interviews like this. And the reason is that, we are almost 100% referral based and have been for a while now. We work really hard to keep up with the volume that we have, which is a very privileged position to be in, and we feel very lucky. But our current clients are our number one marketing. They are in the space talking to their peers. The work that we do for them gets us net inbound calls on a regular basis. And, throughout most of our history, we've worked to just keep up with that. We're at a point where we're a team of about 50 full-time in office and, looking to grow, right? So as we look towards getting to that 100 head count or beyond, I think that obviously we will layer in more client acquisition. But so far, we've been able to just scale with our current flow of referrals.
That's not a bad place to be. It's not something to be ashamed of, Owen.
Well, it feels odd because as a marketer, we talk about all these strategies all the time, but then that's not something that we do very often for ourselves.
Well, it's to kind of assuage your conscience a little bit. I think every business, when you go from startup, you're just scrapping, you're doing everything you can to increase that brand awareness, build that trust, build that authority, get that deal flow going. And then at a certain point, if you're actually good at what you do, you reach this, inflection point where you basically have an escape velocity where the inbound that you're getting is completely servicing your existing revenue needs and the growth trajectory you want to be on. And so while you could do things to speed it up, you're also content with the pace of growth of the company. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say we're happy with this level of continued growth and no more, because that's our sweet spot right now. That's not a bad place to be.
I'm never content on that subject, to be honest. Not even close. I think my bigger limiting is we always want to make sure we grow at a responsible rate so that client experience doesn't suffer. Because that's the biggest thing for me, is making sure that we can find the right people, retain the right people to provide that really high level of experience that our clients have come to expect and quite frankly demand. And so that's been our big limiter, is how do we scale, especially through a really hard labor market, that experience in line with, what I would like to do is from a sales strategy.
Fair enough. Well, Owen, where can people go to learn more about FPW Media and you yourself? Where are the best calls to action, links, websites? Where should people go to learn more about you?
Absolutely. So fpw.com is a great place to connect with the agency. Obviously, we're on all the major social platforms as well. And then I have a personal website. It's just owengaritty.com, where people can connect with me. Also, my personal socials, I'm pretty active. I love to hear from people and just even bounce back and forth marketing ideas. Even if somebody doesn't become a client, I'm always down to get on a call, talk to them. Same with my team. All the senior staff on my team loves to do the same thing. So we're junkies about the subject involved. And so as much as possible, we love to just hear from people.
Wonderful. Well, we'll link all of that in the show notes below so you can go and see which links you want to click on, connect with Owen, learn more about FPW. Owen, thanks for your time and sharing everything that you did. Really appreciate it.
Travis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.